In the summer of 2000, a tourist reached the summit of Europe's largest prehistoric mound, only to feel the ground literally vanish beneath his feet. The 12-metre drop into a Swiss cheese of rotting Georgian tunnels and ancient secrets.
But while we were poking holes looking for a king on a golden horse, we missed the fact that the entire landscape was actually tuned to speak to us. It turns out to find the ancestors, you've got to look across the road.
Today we're heading inside West Kennet Longbarrow to test a theory that these stones aren't just walls, they're a giant instrument. We're investigating the 110 Hz God frequency that reportedly switches off the logical brain and opens a door to something else entirely.
We'll be testing if banging a drum in a 5,000-year-old tomb can actually make us experience the other. We're looking into the fear frequency that makes the chambers ripple like water and hearing the terrifying account of a woman who felt many pairs of hands in the dark.
We'll also meet a man at All Cannings who built a brand new barrow from scratch.
This is Wyrd Wessex.
And today we're unearthing the great barrows of Wessex.
Hello and welcome to Wyrd Wessex. I'm Andy.
And I'm the one they call Craig.
So I hear.
And today we're stood at the base of a very big hill.
Not just any old hill, Craig. A hill with 1-star review on Google Maps.
Wait, hang on. Who's leaving reviews for a hill?
Well, this isn't just any old big hill. This is Silbury, the largest prehistoric man-made mound in Europe. Nearly 40 metres of engineered chalk and earth constructed over a period of up to 100 years.
Yeah, it's staggering to think about the effort. An estimated 4 million man-hours working at minimum wage today. That's about £40 million in labour cost alone.
And there's a reason you can't just go up the hill. Toward the end of May, at the start of the millennium, a tourist ventured to the top of Silbury. When our sightseer reached the summit, he noticed there was something wrong. There was a gaping hole 2 metres across and 12 metres deep in the top of the hill.
And that tourist was never seen again. And that is why, dear listener or viewer, English Heritage do not allow access to the hill anymore.
No, actually, access is discouraged due to the rare diversity of the chalk grassland and wildflowers and the unstable nature of the hill itself. You see, a shaft had been dug in the 18th century, and after that millennium collapse, a complete cave-in was feared.
I mean, I prefer the swallowed by a hill version, but fair enough. All right, yeah, so actually, it's our curiosity that's making it collapse. We've been poking at this thing forever. There's a story from a Mrs. L.F. Brooks, no relation, from Pusey, and she lived near here during the First World War. She said her parents told her that there were full-blown caverns inside the hill.
I've heard that. She claimed she and her brother found an entrance that caved in around 1915. They crawled through a tiny passage that forked one way and was a dead end, but the other led to a cavern as big as a room.
She said they used to take candles in and write their names on the ceilings with the smoke. I mean, can you imagine being a kid 3/4 of the way into this hill and your brother blows out the candle?
It'd be pretty terrifying. But it was stories like that and the local belief that there were rooms and chambers inside that really fueled the fire, might be the candles, for the 1968 excavation. People weren't just expecting soil, they were expecting to find exactly what Mrs. Brooks had seen.
And the hill had long been rumoured to be the final resting place of King Sil, buried upside down on a golden horse, which is why in 1968, when Richard Atkinson arrived with the BBC, it was being billed as the British Tutankhamun.
Yeah, the public was convinced that Atkinson was going to find a prehistoric pharaoh surrounded by gold and riches. It was a national event. People were glued to their seats waiting for the glint of gold.
Yeah, exactly. But when the cameras finally panned into the central chamber, there was nothing, no king, no gold, just layers of compressed soil.
And it was the ultimate archaeological anticlimax, I guess. But the BBC cameras did catch the debris of a massive construction site. They found antler picks, the actual tools used to hack the chalk out, and Atkinson even claimed that he'd found the remains of winged ants in the turf, suggesting...
Wait, is this just a giant anthill?
Well, no. Suggesting that the hill was actually started in August when queens and males leave the nest to sort of mate in flight. So it got a time of year, that it was actually built. Real precise stuff.
All right, so because we hadn't found a gold reason for the hill, we did just keep poking holes in it. And by the time the millennium turned, Silbury was essentially a Swiss cheese of old rotting timber shafts. Which brings us to our tourist in 2000. So when that summit collapsed, it was the hill finally groaning under the weight of 200 years of our own curiosity.
Yeah, English Heritage had to act. Between 2007 and 2008, they launched a massive restoration project. They had to go back into the tunnels one last time to backfill them with 1,500 tons of crushed chalk.
Wow.
And that was actually the first time anyone really been into the heart of the hill for 40 years.
And this time they had modern forensics as well. So they were able to re-examine the primary mound, that tidy gravel core at the very centre. And what they found was perfectly preserved Neolithic moss and blades of grass that were still as green as when the first basket of earth was dropped there. But no bodies. So, and it's not an anthill then.
No.
So if it's not the tomb of King Sil, what is it?
Well, it's been variously considered to be a temple to Mercury, the motte of a castle, a constituent part of the Avebury ritual complex, a mound for assemblies, or even a platform for astronomical observations. It's been thought to be dedicated to the sun, to represent the earth, or even according to Arthur Shuttlewood, heard of him, the final resting place for none other than the Holy Grail.
Wow. But yeah, I mean, clearly it's kind of held like a ritual power for the locals for a long time. So in the 18th century, William Stukeley observed how the country people have an anniversary meeting at the top of Silbury Hill on every Palm Sunday, when they make merry with cakes, figs, sugar and water fetched from the Swallowhead or spring of the Kennet.
Yeah, and it's possible that as many people make the pilgrimage to the site today as ever did in the past. While certainly an archaeological monument of first importance, whatever its original purpose, part of the present sort of significance is as a modern temple, really.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to wonder though, like if the hill was built slowly over a period of like 100 years, is it like the Philly Loo?
You mean the rich of that sort of small little village in Ashmore, Dorset, sort of to appease the great beast of the village pond? Is that what they have one in Parton dedicated to you?
Yes, but more importantly, did people in the time at the time of its construction kind of lose the knowledge of why it was being constructed?
Yeah, it became it's a thing we do, you know. We've always done it, so we don't know why. Our ancestors did it, so we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And then maybe folklore and stories got added to to its own sort of construction timeline until its meaning was completely lost.
I mean, maybe there never was one reason, right? Maybe we'll never know. I mean, so when did they stop building? Like, when was it deemed finished?
We don't really know. Maybe beliefs changed and people moved on. It happens. But recent research suggests that it wasn't just a static pile. It might have been built in sort of spiral ramp going up the building. It could have been the ritual itself.
Yeah, and maybe they had a huge opening ceremony with the local mayor cutting a ribbon.
Yeah, that's it. So I don't know what robes they'd have worn back then, but I like that.
Yeah. But once the mound had reached its maximum size, it continued to be used and adapted for other purposes. From the summit, one would have a clear view into the West Kennet palisaded enclosures and parts of Avebury Henge.
And the size of the hill and location of its sort of in a natural bowl also give it a good acoustic properties as well, which may have been later exploited to provide sort of otherworldly aspects, to the experience of a ritual.
Yeah, so with this in mind, English heritage archaeologist Sarah May conducted an experiment in 2007 into the hill's acoustic properties. She asked musicians to play instruments from the summit, such as stone whistles, frame drums, bone flutes, wooden flutes, animal horns and bronze horns, and used volunteers placed throughout the area to record what they could hear. And the results were then digitally modelled.
Yeah, the results are fascinating. Silbury actually acts as an acoustic barrier. It effectively blocks sound coming from the north, from Avebury, but it amplifies and sort of transmits it perfectly to the south.
So to the south actually is where Swallowhead Spring is.
So it'd have been quite a good sort of effect coming from that direction, yeah?
Yeah, and so it almost seems as if the hill had been built to kind of be seen and heard by the people in the valley while effectively turning its back on Avebury.
Screw you, Avebury. But for all its ancient mysteries, we almost lost the site in its entirety in the 1800s.
Yeah, because in the Victorian era, archaeology was often just a fancy word for treasure hunting, right? And Silbury was private property.
Yeah, it was owned by a man named Alfred Puss. He was a businessman who saw the hill less as a monument and more as a project. By the 1880s, his work was underway. He was actually planning to sink new shafts and tunnels into the mound to see what he could find.
Yeah, it was basically a race against time before he turned the hill into a total colander, right? But luckily, one of the most influential figures of the Victorian antiquarian scene had already entered the stage, and this is Sir John Lubbock.
Great name. Lubbock was a wealthy banker with a keen interest in prehistory, and he could see that if someone didn't act past his excavations would eventually cause the whole thing just to cave in.
Yeah, so John was familiar with Silbury Hill, having dug there with Wilkinson in 1867. And so when the estate around Silbury was put up for auction in 1873, Lubbock, then the president of the Wiltshire Archaeological and Natural History Society, persuaded the landowners to apportion Silbury and a small plot immediately around it as a separate plot.
Yeah, well, he purchased this lot himself and placed it within the guardianship of the then recently created Ancient Monuments Board. Silbury Hill was thus sort of preserved for the entire nation.
In 1900, Lubbock was awarded a peerage for his political work and chose the title Lord Avebury.
Awesome.
A testimony to his love of archaeology in the area. And without him, we might be looking at a housing estate instead of a 4,500-year-old mystery.
Before we move on, we have to mention that just down the road, tucked inside the grounds of Marlborough College, is the Marlborough Mound. For centuries, it was known simply as Merlin's Mound.
Because that's where the great wizard was buried, right?
Well, indeed, that is the legend. The motto of the town is actually Ubi Nunc Sapientis Ossa Merlini.
Easy for you to say.
which translates roughly in my horrible Latin, where now are the bones of wise Merlin. But English Heritage and the Marlborough Mound Trust have been working to prove that it's far older than the Arthurian legends.
Yeah, because for the longest time, everyone thought it was just a medieval castle not built after the Norman conquest, right?
Exactly, but coring sort of work in 2010 changed everything. Radiocarbon dating on charcoal from core samples proved that it was actually built around 2400 BC. It's the second largest Neolithic mound in Europe, built exactly the same time as Silbury Hill. It's essentially Silbury Hill's sort of little brother, just sort of 8 kilometres to the east. And I think I mentioned on the podcast before that I was actually working at the college the year that happened, because I actually got snuck up there by the history lecturer at the college. He was like, "We're not supposed to go up here anymore. It's going to be a World Heritage Site." But you know, and he showed me the boreholes and everything. And it's the only reason they did it was because the trees were in danger of like basically ripping the hill apart, and so they were working on that. And that's when they pulled the samples up. So it's really fascinating stuff.
And yeah, it's actually currently quite a huge year for the mound too, isn't it? So as we speak, they're finally peeling back the layers. They've just started removing the modern carpentry workshops and water tanks that were cut into the side of the mound back in the early 20th century to finally restore its 4,000-year-old shape. Yeah,
that's right. And there's even a major conference at the Society of Antiquaries this April to mark 25 years of the trust. Removing those sheds is finally going to let archaeologists see a proper sort of profile of the mound for the first time in, well, sort of absolutely generations. It's a massive archaeological moment for the town.
Yeah, it really is. And it's interesting how these sites have this kind of dual identity. Officially, it's the Marlborough Mound, but to everyone else for the last 1,000 years, it's Merlin's Mound. And according to the locals, these hills weren't built by Neolithic farmers at all. They were dropped.
You're talking about the Devil's Shovel.
Yeah, exactly. So the story goes that the devil's heading towards Marlborough with a giant sack of earth, intent on burying the town and everyone in it, because they were getting a bit too holy for his liking.
Yeah, but he met a local cobbler on the road, didn't he?
He did. So the cobbler was carrying a huge bag of old tattered boots, and when the devil asked how far it was to Marlborough, the cobbler lied through his teeth. He showed him the bag and said, "I've worn out every one of these pairs just walking from here."
And so the devil just gave up.
He was so discouraged that he just dumped the earth right there on that spot. And that giant heap became Silbury Hill, and some say the Marlborough Mound was just the last bit of dust he shook out of the sack before he stomped off.
I like that. It's a great way to explain why there are two of them, why they look so sort of out of place. It's very kind of Giant's Causeway with the rocks going across, and sort of I like that.
And anyone that obviously watched the Warmint's the Thing episode will know that same story is kind of given to other places like Clay Hill as well.
He thought he'd have another go, maybe just like, met the same cobbler, fell for it again, maybe.
That was stupid, eh?
I suppose so. Okay, Craig, so I have to ask.
No, you cannot roll down that hill.
Oh, all right, never mind. Well, I had to ask why you dragged me here when you said we were going to be talking about barrows today. Because as impressive as it is, it's not exactly a barrow in the sort of traditional sense, is it? It's sort of, people were kind of hoping it would be, I guess.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really a barrow in the traditional barrow sense.
But that's the weirdness of Silbury. It looks like a barrow, it's shaped like a barrow, but as we've seen, every time we've gone looking for a body, we've come up empty-handed. It's a monument that mimics the House of the Dead.
So, if the biggest mound in Europe isn't for the ancestors, then where are they?
They are right there, just across the A4, perched on that ridge. And if you want to see where they actually put the bodies, we just need to head over to West Kennet Longbarrow. It's been holding on to its secrets for 5,000 years. And unlike this hill, it's got the bones to prove it.
West Kennet Longbarrow is a Neolithic chamber tomb, around 100 metres long and 20 metres wide. The barrow would have originally stood as a striking beacon on the landscape, its chalk construction gleaming white in the sunlight. It was built over 5,500 years ago.
Well, seemed pretty good nick for something that old, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's because it was rebuilt after an archaeological dig here in the 1950s. This long barrow forms one of over 200 barrows in this part of southwestern England known as the Cotswold 7 group. All created in the early Neolithic period, although the number is possibly much higher than that. But they were destroyed over the millennia. Over 30 of those are located in the immediate area close to Avebury and Silbury Hill.
And now, so these are like all long barrows, right?
That's right. Later, going into the Bronze Age, you start seeing more round barrows popping up. But this area is rife with these sort of wonderful chambered tombs, and West Kennet is probably the best example of a reconstruction, although the most famous is perhaps Wayland Smithy in Oxfordshire.
Yeah, I mean, it was an impressive feat of structural engineering at the time, and of course was a resting place for the dead. A mixture of men, women and children were interred here over many centuries, and there's evidence to suggest that the bones were semi-frequently moved between the chambers. It's hard to tell if this was for some form of ancestral veneration, where the bones would be removed entirely, used in a rite and returned, or just to make room for more. And there's archaeological evidence for feasts and celebrations taking place at the site, including animal bones with cut marks on them and the sites of multiple fires close to the entrance. One man buried in the early period of the barrow, and the only complete skeleton on the site, had a broken arm with a flint arrowhead located near his throat, perhaps indicating a violent death. Although, again, the placement of the arrow could instead have some religious significance.
The bones themselves were initially believed to have been left out for a form of sort of sky burial or excarnation, where bodies are left to be picked clean by birds and other animals, rotting to bare bones before being interred. This was due to the fact that the remains were sort of disarticulated, that is, separated rather than sort of, all kept together in one sort of form of a skeleton. More recent research actually suggests it's due to them being moved and rearranged, supporting the theory of them being sort of used in rituals, sort of brought out, or maybe to make way for more recent burials. We'll probably never know.
I mean, yeah, so there's like a belief that this is some kind of ancestor worshipping cult, right?
Yeah.
So taking Granny out once a year and asking her to bring you luck and a good harvest.
Yeah, it seems that way. Though again, like so many other notions of sort of prehistoric religion, it is all just guesswork ultimately. Anyway, everyone knows you ask Granny for good health, sort of great Uncle Bob for the harvest. That's the way of things.
That's where I've been going wrong then.
Yeah.
So after several centuries passed, the tomb fell out of use and began to decay, and some of the walls started to collapse. However, a few hundred years later, a second phase of burials took place. And at this point, bigger sarsen stones were laid along with chalk, rubble, and even bones to fill in the gaps left by the erosion. It was also at this point we started seeing pots and tools interred as well as animal bones.
So each of these chambers held sort of a mixture of bodies, yeah?
Yeah, so the one just by the entrance, the southeast chamber, just to the left of the entrance actually, contains the remains of at least 5 infants.
That's a horrifically sobering thought, sitting in the middle of a sort of all that history.
It really is, and it wasn't until around 4,500 years ago that the tomb was finally sealed, and some of the stones used for that blocking still stand in the front of the entrance to this day.
But that wasn't the end of the story. Nearly 3,000 years later, Romano-British coins were buried above the entrance in the topsoil. Now, this isn't unusual for sort of Neolithic and Bronze Age monuments in the area. There weren't coin hoards hidden by people hoping to come back for them, but seem to have all the hallmarks of kind of an offering. A practice, I suppose, is still in place to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose after it was sealed and the offerings were sort of buried, that's it, kind of until the 1950s dig, right?
Not quite, actually. So in the 17th century, a certain Dr. Toop from Marlborough led a dig here.
That's funny, you don't think of archaeology in the sort of 17th century, do you?
Well, neither did Dr. Toop. He was actually looking for human bones to grind up and use in his cure-all potions.
Oh.
Hmm.
So, we're in this chamber right now. It's heavy, it's quiet. Is it just the history that makes this place feel so, sort of charged, do you think?
Actually, it might be more physical than that, Andy. So people report seeing things here or hearing chanting through the stone, and it might not just be like imagination, it might be the architecture itself working on their brains.
So you mean the barrow itself is doing it to us?
Yeah, exactly, because it's not just about what you see in here, it's about how the space is tuned. So we're standing inside what is effectively a giant stone instrument.
You're talking about archaeoacoustics, right? The idea that these chambers weren't just built to hold the dead, but they are actually tuned like instruments.
Yeah, so I've been digging into the works of researchers like Paul Devereux and Robert Yan, and they've found that almost every Neolithic site in the landscape, from Wayland Smithy to right here at West Kennet, resonates at a very specific frequency, around 110 hertz. Now, some researchers have gone as far as calling it the God frequency.
Band name. Straight away, band name. I assume it's doing something a bit more profound than just, sort of sounding cool, right?
Yeah, much more. So it's functioning, intentionally or not, to put you in a trance. Studies on brain activity have shown that exposure to exactly 110 hertz can actually dampen the prefrontal cortex, the logical center of the brain, and shift dominance over to the right side. It triggers intuition and a deep meditative state. And when you're in here, people often report a sense of disembodiment, as if they've stepped out of their own skin and are floating in the stone.
And that's when they encounter the other. Whether you call it a religious epiphany or a neurological glitch, the result's the same. You stop being a tourist observing a monument, you start being sort of an active part in it.
Yeah, but that's where the big debate in the field kicks off. The skeptical side, and to be fair, that's kind of the most mainstream archaeologist way, would be to say it's a happy accident of physics. They'd argue that any small stone-walled chamber of this size is naturally going to have a resonant frequency in that range. To them, it's not a tuned instrument, it's just a side effect of how you pile up heavy sarsens.
So yeah, we might be projecting our modern musical theory onto a 5,000-year-old pile of rocks, but even if it is an accident of the stonework, it's an accident our ancestors live with every single day. If every time they went inside to move the bones of their fathers, the room started humming, their brain started shifting into a trance, they would have noticed, and they would have used it.
Precisely, yeah. Whether they designed it that way or just took advantage of the magic once the roof was on, the effect remains the same. The barrow becomes a bridge, and the science gets even weirder. The Yan paper describes how these chambers create standing waves. The sound reflects off these sarsens so perfectly that the waves stay still in the air. You could walk through this chamber and feel hot spots of vibrating air hitting your chest.
Well, we're in the chamber. We should see if we can sort of wake that voice up. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I've brought a skin frame drum with me. So if the theories are right, this room should act like an amplifier for that one specific note.
Right, so Craig's got his drum warmed up.
Yeah.
Take it away, I guess.
And apologies for the terrible drumming. I'm not a drummer. But yeah, let's see if this works. We'll do a couple of minutes of drumming.
Yeah.
I
First
guess.
live show of the God Frequency, band.
Hello and welcome to the God Frequency. This is our first gig to nobody.
Yeah, for my album, The Brown Note.
Yeah, if you shit yourself listening to this podcast, it's his fault.
I'm going to turn the lights off now. Rest assured I'll be standing roughly where I was.
Well,
yeah, let me turn the light back on. At least this one. There we are. Yeah, so obviously it's going to be different for you because you're playing it, you're concentrating on something. Couple of things I found. One, it was easier to sort of get lost in it a little bit when the lights are off. I think there's a lot of visual distractions don't help.
Yeah.
Um, I can't say it was like walls or waves of sound exactly as described in that experiment, in the Marshall one, but there was a moment quite early on, and it might have been on camera. I don't know how well it sort of showed up, but it was when we had the lights on.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, I'm going to close my eyes now, and I found myself, and it might be a thing for the drumming, or it might be the environment, but when I closed my eyes, I found myself just naturally swaying a little bit. And there was a point where I opened my eyes because literally I felt myself going forward like that. I was like, I'm going to fall over. And I tried doing it just then, and it was. And when you picked up, increased it, it did. The feeling changed. But again, that could just be drumming changing and upping tempo when you're used to something. It's hard to say, but
Yeah.
I mean, part of me thinks we should try it with one of us by the entrance and one of us here listening to the drumming.
And that is what they said they did previously with the 14-year-old boy. Yeah, we could do. The only thing I noticed is because you stood in the dark without the lights on, I could see the entrance.
Yeah.
And you do get that fleeting things moving almost.
Yeah, and I kind of wish I'd have focused on the entrance a little bit more, to be honest.
And the only other thing is, after a while, the drum, I did hear like a vibration coming back from my ear, which you get from sound anyway.
One thing I will say in terms of visual effects, I noticed that my vision, when your vision softens, whether it's like you're just, you're tired, you're not concentrating, you're kind of dozing, whatever, your vision softens. I kind of experienced that really. There was this real sort of just, I don't want to say blurring of the vision, but kind of just like when I was looking to the entrance, everything just like kind of became out of focus. But I don't know again if that's just I had someone like when I was much more skeptical, and I still count myself as a bit of a skeptic, but someone at my old archery club got really, and he was a builder, but then had a sideline in doing sound healing. And he had a guy called Brian. He had a drum that he'd made on a workshop, and he said that he did sound healing. And I had a bad back or something was going on, and he did it to me. And it was just drumming up and down my body, and he spun this whole thing about the vibrational frequencies and stuff. And I did find myself just getting lulled into this, like, ooh. But again, that's more just the effect of the drumming, I think, on your brain than it is but it still was there, So I wonder how much of it is just that repeated drumming, and how much of it is the environment that we're in.
Yeah, could be a combination.
Yeah.
Two things. I would imagine if we kind of kept going and you could drum for hours on end, that feeling would kind of wave over you a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, should one of us go to the entrance and
we can try some drumming? Do you want to have a go?
Yeah,
I'll stay standing here in the dark. Tell you what I'll do. I'm going to face away from the camera because you talked about a portal opening, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder if I should be staring at one spot whilst you do it.
Are you going to do the creepy looking against the wall in the corner Blair Witch thing?
Sure. I mean, you're guarding the entrance. So if I disappear at this point, I've been sucked into oblivion? I don't know. Wow. That was interesting.
Thank you very much. We'll be here all week. Yeah.
So you didn't throw your drumstick at me.
You didn't throw your pants at me.
No. So when I stood with my back,
I
stood this way, closed my eyes. After a while, especially when you picked up and you got a bit louder, I could actually feel the vibrations hitting me.
Really?
In my back. It could just gently. There was like in time with the beat, I could feel my back vibrating.
It's described as using a bass drum, right? When they did the experiment with the 14.
Yeah, so it's probably
something a bit bigger. So you'd have had a harder wall of sound hitting you.
I think as well, like this drum is a proper skin drum and it needs warming up. I've done the best I can with the situation, but ideally we want like a fire or something to warm it up, so it's not quite tight enough to make a good sound. But yeah, so I was feeling these vibrations, and then I did for a while. I had a kind of feeling I would class as almost a dread feeling.
Was it when I started picking up, started getting So towards the end, and I'd be interested once we watch this back to see how it came back, sort of like down to here. I stopped doing it stationary and started moving it around.
Oh, that's what you were doing. Okay.
That.
So there was a sense of dread, and then there was a point where I almost had like, I don't know, I felt like emotional, like I wanted to cry for only for a few seconds, and then it would pass, and then it would come back again. I don't know whether that's that experience of the waves hitting me that made me go, oh, hang on, and then it would go, and then it would come back again.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not just he's really bad at drumming.
Is it ruining my drum? No, no, it was just one of those. And I said, I don't want to like. I'm not making anything up or anything. I don't.
No. I mean, genuinely, like I will say for my part, and I don't know how much of it was the drumming, because obviously it does give you something to focus on.
Yeah.
Because I could just see like the outline of Craig here, sort of quite stationary, and I was either side of me are the first two chambers as you come into West Kennet. And I was really feeling like the darkness from those chambers when I was doing that. And I don't know whether it's just you're surrounded by two things that every book and story and movie has taught you are very scary places. Complete pitch black, and there's me standing in the middle of them. And I was just like not wanting to look, but also feeling very drawn by them. But that might just be my weird brain.
Well, we mentioned as well the frequencies are different in those chambers as well. Yeah. So whether that would make a difference. I think we could try the bull roarer. Yeah. Just making a phone call, Andy. Crocodile Dundee reference. You didn't know. Do love the sound of these.
It's an amazing sound. So simple yet so, you know.
And these are quite historic instruments, aren't they? They go back quite a
it's into like different cultures as well.
And I think they're believed to be some kind of ritualistic thing again. So
yeah,
if you don't hit your leg.
I mean, I realise it's quite new age, but a guy I know's old chap called Seeker does sound journeys, hosts them at the ATC sometimes, and it sounds amazing in the Earth House. But yeah, he tends to open and close the sound journey with a bull roarer.
I don't feel like it's vibrating back as much, whether it's not loud enough.
I mean, you said maybe at the entrance way.
Do you want me to try that?
Maybe go up to the entrance, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting as well. This is something they probably would have recognised.
Yeah.
So if there is anything here.
Drums, bull roarers, basic pipes. So yeah, I mean, with that, it wasn't as urgent as drumming or anything like that, but it wasn't quite as impactful. However, it did kind of, the only way I can describe it is rather than, I guess it's the nature of the bull roar sound, but it felt like it was sort of cascading towards me a little bit, you know, rather than just there's a noise being made up there that's echoing or whatever. It was kind of like I could almost feel it coming in, sort of pushing down almost, you know. That's the only way I can describe it. But I mean, you've got to remember as well, some people can rubbish this idea of the acoustics of these sort of places as just being a happy coincidence. If it's used as a ritual space, which, you know, for this place at least, there is evidence that it is. You look at modern churches or old churches, any churches, temples where singing and music was made, you find the same thing because it is built to do that. And it's not some greater understanding. It's not necessarily aliens coming to like show them how to do it or any of that stuff. It is just having a knowledge of how sound works. And when you're a culture that isn't sat in front of the TV or on a computer, your entertainment, your celebration, it is all being together, ultimately making sounds, be it singing, music, or stories. You learn how sound works in the places that you use it, right? So, you know, it probably wasn't like made with an incredible mathematical intricacy just to do that. But they knew roughly, I think, in my mind, that's what it does. And they would build it in mind. At least that's my personal opinion.
Yeah. We did mention as well, but there are sites all across the globe that they've tested this theory, and so the pyramids in Egypt do it.
Yeah, Newgrange.
Newgrange was the other one I was thinking of. Yeah, in Ireland.
I think there's some sites in like North and South America as well. So yeah, it is not just a phenomenon that's like, you know, sort of unique to the UK. It is all over.
So researcher Steve Marshall actually found that the side chambers are built in a 4:3 ratio, a perfect fourth in musical terms. It's literally a stone chord. He determined that these chambers resonate at either 84 Hz or 110 Hz, which is right in the sweet spot of the male vocal range. So you're actually meant to chant in here, Andy.
But there's a darker side to it too, isn't there? Infrasound frequencies around 8 to 9 Hz, too low for the human ear to catch, but your sort of body detects them as kind of a primitive alarm, the fear frequency, they call it.
Yeah, it triggers a psychological emergency in the brain, dizziness, chills, and these peripheral hallucinations where you're certain that there's something moving in the corner of your eye. Marshall actually conducted a test here with a 14-year-old initiate in this very central corridor. He had a drummer stand immediately outside the entrance, hitting a miniature bass drum loudly with sticks to generate that infrasound.
And the boy had a massive reaction. He reported that with his eyes open, the end stones of the chamber appeared to be moving and rippling around like water. Then on the back wall, a small black circle appeared and grew into like a portal, a passage into another chamber he thought he could see sort of into.
It gets weirder though, so he continued to listen with his eyes closed. Listen with his eyes closed?
Eyes closed.
To take in the hobbits to eyes closed. So it gets actually weirder than that. So he then continued to listen with his eyes closed and was convinced that on 2 occasions someone had joined him in the chamber. He felt a presence standing right there next to him. But when the drumming stopped, he was entirely alone. Marshall suspects that the 8 Hz exposure was kind of vibrating the boy's eyes, tricking his brain into sensing the other.
So you've got a room that switches off your logic, vibrates your skull, and then triggers a physical sort of fear response. Since the late 90s, research like the Tandy study in 1998, The Ghost in the Machine, has used this to explain the paranormal as sort of all in the mind. They say it's just sort of a physiological hack. Nausea, anxiety and dread sort of caused by this vibration.
Yeah, that's the neurological glitch view, but although there's no question infrasound induces a shifted state of consciousness, there's no reason to assume that this isn't a very real effect on the human brain, one that can lead to genuine visionary experiences and psychic insights. Is it a glitch, or is it the brain finally opening a door it usually keeps locked?
There is sort of a deeply unsettling account from Sonia Smith's book, Wiltshire, Stories of the Supernatural, that sort of perfectly captures that sort of thinness of the veil. It follows a woman named Anya who arrived here and hesitated at the very entrance, sort of like just sort of by there where we're standing close to. She was caught in that classic struggle with a mix of anticipation and this sort of churning dread, but she took a sort of deep breath and entered the tomb. Immediately, the air changed. It was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient decay. But she noticed a strange warmth enveloping her, this sort of stark contrast to the chilly wind whipping across the hills outside.
As she moved further in, the passageway narrowed, leading her towards the central chamber where we are now, usually dimly lit by flickering candles left by previous visitors. The sight of those offerings, the candles, fruit and incense, filled her with a sense of awe, but also a touch of unease. She found herself wondering if these were offerings to ancient benevolent gods or something more sinister. As she ventured deeper into the dark, a peculiar sense kind of washed over her, a sudden dizziness, a heaviness in her limbs that she tried to dismiss as just, the confined space and the lack of light.
Yeah, but as she turned to leave, a chill just sort of ran straight down her spine. An unseen force seemed to hold her captive, a silent sort of suffocating presence that just stopped her dead in her tracks. Then a low, rhythmic breathing sort of filled the air, a sound that was somehow both comforting and sort of altogether really something quite terrifying. She felt a gentle touch, almost imperceptible at first, brushing against her skin. A cold dread seized her and she realised she was alone in this darkness. Then, in the total blackness, it was as if many pairs of hands began to caress her, brushing over her shoulders, her face, her back.
Wow. So she struggled to break free, her heart pounding in her chest. She tried to cry out to her husband for help, but her throat had constricted. Nothing but a dry croak came out. It was only a sudden surge of adrenaline that finally fueled her escape. She burst out of the tomb into the daylight, gasping for air. Her husband, described as being a man of logic and reason, struggled to comprehend what she was telling him. He dismissed the whole ordeal as a trick of the mind, a product of fear and vivid imagination.
But Anya knew better. She had felt the presence of something ancient and altogether otherworldly in there. The tomb, she realised, was more than just a relic of the past. It was a portal to a hidden realm, a place where the veil between worlds is notoriously thin. And honestly, given that we know this chamber held the disarticulated remains of so many different people, those sort of many pairs of hands might be more literal than her husband cared to think.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes you kind of want to keep your back to the wall, doesn't it, whilst you're in here?
I don't know, it depends if they're coming out of the wall.
Mm.
You know what I'm going to ask now, though, don't you?
Why build a tomb to begin with?
Yeah, other than sort of show the status and show off to all your enemies and the people in the landscape around.
Well, I mean, to find out why someone built this tomb is tricky. I mean, we may never really know, but we can ask someone who has built a tomb.
Please don't tell me you've built a time machine again.
No.
Time slip? Casper, the sort of hopefully friendly ghost?
No, actually, so we have a modern barrow not that far away, and I've arranged for us to meet the creator tomorrow morning.
All right, you sure he's not a ghost, though?
I mean, why do you think I arranged a daylight meeting?
Yeah, it's probably quite sensible. So, Tim, you are the builder of this magnificent Long Barrow. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and have you always been interested in the history, especially of this sort of structure and period?
Yeah, so I'm Tim Daw. I've always lived. I spent the whole of my life on this farm here in the middle of Wiltshire. About 15 years ago, I happened upon a job at Stonehenge. I got no archaeological training or anything before that, but I was really interested. I mean, you can't live in this part of the world without noticing the archaeology and being interested in it. So I started working at Stonehenge for a while and combining what I learned at Stonehenge, there were several things down there, having this bit of land and all the rest of the stuff, the idea of a long barrow came together from that.
So what was your original kind of inspiration? What made you want to build a barrow in the first place?
It was a combination of a couple of things. For a long time, we'd sort of played with ideas about whether you could build a monument in this area, maybe up on top of the hills for the millennia or something like that.
Yeah.
So building something big was in the back of my mind, but what for was, why would you do it? But when I was actually working at Stonehenge, one of the problems we had to deal with, is people who'd bring their ashes, or the mother or whoever, and want to put them in the stones, which of course they can't do, and you'd have to talk them down from doing it or try to prevent them doing it, and treating them with respect and kindness. And you've got to understand this deep longing people have to where ashes end up. And the more we talked about it, the more we thought there's rather limited choices in this country. Churches don't do it very well. It's rather a boring little plot by the back door normally, something like that. And a lot of the national parks, they don't want ashes because it upsets the soil chemistry. So I thought, could we combine that with building something? Could we, barrows, communal. Yes, it all seemed to come together. It was surprising how it all clicked together, and we ended up designing it. And is it possible? I must admit, I thought the council would not allow us to do it.
Yeah.
Which would have been a great story. I had a brilliant idea, but with the council. But yeah,
Oh no, I've got to do it now.
yeah, absolutely. But it's and everything just clicked through without council said yes. All stuff. So wonderful.
So, I don't know, what was the reaction of your family, friends, or even just the general public when you told them what you wanted to do?
Surprisingly, most people got it very quickly.
Was it more of a sort of, we're not surprised, it's Tim?
Yeah,
was that?
A little bit of that, but a little bit when you actually said, said, well, I think we can do this. I think we can do it tastefully. I think we'll fit in. People said, yeah, and the whole idea of somewhere with this ethos of natural respecting the past, for actually just clicked with so many people. I thought I'd get a lot of pushback against it because, I mean, it's a big structure.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of an AONB. We're one of the most protected landscapes, and we did it. What was it? 2014. We did. It rained every day when we started building it. It was like there was just mud and muck everywhere and destroyed. Yeah, and no one ever said, "What are you doing?" It's just like, "Oh, it's coming on well." Yeah, so it was all very encouraging.
Yeah. So I mean, how did the kind of local community in general react to when building work particularly started?
I'm sure some people were against it or horrified, but I only ever heard positive things, which was quite strange. Because I've tried doing other little building things, and you always hear people complaining about everything or trying to stop you doing it.
Not in my backyard.
Absolutely, yes, but no, nothing at all like that. It was quite. It was almost odd the way it just resonated with so many people.
Sort of going along from that in the building process, how long did it take, and what was sort of the challenges apart from the sort of constant pouring rain that you had to overcome?
The bigger challenges was I got planning permission. And it was rather vague deliberately because I had no idea how to build a long barrow, and I was imagining I'd have to use concrete and structure like that, and then one of those. There were so many wonderful coincidences. A stonemason happened to read about it when he was on holiday and contacted me. This was Garrington particularly, and said, I know how to build it. How are you going to do it? I said, I don't know. If you know how to do it, come and talk to me.
Yeah.
And he came, and so all the stonework, the interior structure, everything like that is his genius at work. So just on how long once we got going and got ready, the key thing we wanted to do was set up it on a solstitial alignment. So we'd actually measured up for a year or so before where the sun rose at midwinter, and we had some stakes in the ground. So that was the longest bit. Once we got going, we broke ground on December 21st, 2013. I think that's right, yes.
It's a good day to start.
Yep, we had a little ceremony. It absolutely rained and poured. We didn't get the sun, but we thought, right, that's that. And we opened exactly 9 months later on this autumn equinox. The actual stonework was about 4.5, 5 months.
Was that a happy coincidence, or was that something you were aiming for?
It gave us a good date to aim for when we thought, right, we can do it.
Yeah.
A bit of a panic on the last couple of days, but
I'm quite amazed it happened that quickly. Actually,
Yeah.
it's a lot of stonework.
it's a lot of stonework. It was every stone is hand. It's all handwork.
Yeah.
I'm doing a cottage up at the moment, and that's taking far longer.
Moving here.
Since we last spoke to you, we went to do you know Cerdroyer in Cornwall?
No, I don't know.
It's a sort of a labyrinth,
It's
isn't
a
it?
Cornish labyrinth,
Yeah.
That they're doing.
partly made out of stonework.
Oh yes, the new yes.
Yes,
I've read about it. I've not been.
It's sort of mid-construction as they're trying to get funding for it.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's sort of a very long-term project, isn't it? And it's
Very long term.
yeah, it's all done with partly done with traditional sort of Cornish hedging stonework.
Yeah.
Part of it, sort of actual hedges. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was just wondering like some of the same sort of challenges and just the ideas of wanting to do it because you can, sort of, or partly at least.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we had all sorts of challenges, and all of them to I mean, the biggest challenge was finding big Sarsen stones, because no one will let you have them. And I was sort of giving up, and then bizarrely, the local reclamation yard had 100 tons of Sarsen stones. They'd had dug up. Someone saw them. I thought, I'll have them.
You just think, oh, Avebury won't miss a few.
Yes.
Get on the back of a truck.
Was it constructed entirely with modern machinery, or did you kind of find certain elements work better with kind of the traditional methods?
It is all very traditional methods. There's no concrete, for instance, or steel. It is just hand building. You've got this wonderful corbelled roof. Modern machinery was just mainly moving heavy rocks about and moving stuff about. This whole thing weighs thousands of tons.
Yeah.
So
I think you said before that all the stones were hand shaped as well.
Yes.
So
every stone here is curved and fitted and something like that. So.
Wow.
I mean, sort of going off that as well, what did sort of using, obviously the limited use of modern machinery for moving things, but just in general, the process of you building it in modern sort of times, teach you, or just, sort of the people involved about what the ancestors, what the people, the original builders of these things would have faced, Did it say, oh, how did they work this one out? Or what do you think they'd have done when faced with this?
I know Geraint and the stonemasons, you really got into how that was there. One of the things was building these corbelled roofs. They started very small. Each of the, do these really work?
Yeah.
And since we've done these ones, we've got a small one, the very first one, this one. They've gone on and built really huge ones elsewhere, amazing structures. So we've renovated a lost craft with that. The other thing was, it's even the Sarsen stones, the big ones.
Yeah.
Then we moved them. They seemed, the stonemasons felt they always had a spirit to them, that they wanted to be here or there, and if you didn't get them right, they wouldn't sit.
Yeah, they just fit to a place that
Yeah.
they're supposed to fit to almost.
I know with the lintel stone, we tried it one way up and it wouldn't sit there at all. We tried it the other way up, and it was there and it wasn't quite right. I went up and it's quite it's a big stone, and just had a wooden bar. I thought, just to see if it rocked, and it just moved it about 3 inches, and it just clicked into place.
Amazing.
And it's like, it just went, and that was solid. And it's like, right, it's found its place. So, not real, but it just felt, you can see how people get this feeling for working with the stone.
Yeah, I've spoken to stonemasons before. They said, sort of the stone wants to be shaped this way. And I guess it's like anything. You're following like woodworking. You're following the natural curves of things that it sort of lends itself to. But I'm guessing that one just wanted to be right there, bashing people's heads as they walk.
Yes.
Yeah, so a lot of people think of barrows kind of as static, almost like dead places, right? But with people constantly visiting and dropping off their loved ones, and these niches around us here are all being filled up as well. Do you see this more as a place of the living rather than the dead?
In a way, yes. For two things. One is that yes, it's still a very active place, and people come back and remember. People use it as a landmark. There's always people go out, walk up to the barrow, take the dog. So it's a very integral part of the community. But more importantly, one of the things you say is that funerals are actually for the living; they're not for the dead. You've probably heard this before, and it is so true. Because and it's one thing I used to say to people when they're choosing niches. I don't really care what happens to my whatever. I said, well, make your wishes known, because it's your family that the funeral's for. It's not for you. You don't know what's going to happen. You're not there. But it gives them a place to remember, a place of solace, and not only we a lot of people come here and it's closure. This is the final part of the funeral thing. We see a lot of closure. All these things are important. The other thing is what I've learnt about long barrows, particularly and any barrows, is about the process of memorialising the dead. Is that by putting your gran in a place like this, you're saying she was someone special. This isn't just utilitarian.
Yeah.
This is a much bigger structure than it needs to be, much more fine. And you're saying she was really worth it. And that's important. I mean, I'm saying, so this one's not for the dead, because it says, unless you're an absolute tyrant, I deserve a huge mausoleum. But we don't do that any longer. But your family might think you're actually worth remembering, and it's to help them. So, that's always my takeaway. Like, this might not be for you or your family, but whatever you do, get it sorted.
What would you say, sort of by far and large, that people's reactions are when they first walk into this place for the first time?
It is amazement, and that's part of a theatre. It's I wasn't clever enough to think this through, but this is how it actually works. That it's quite unassuming on the outside.
Yeah.
It's very rough and natural, and even to having a fairly low doorway, so you have to crouch to come down in. And you're not, if you don't know anything about it, you're not going to expect very much from the outside. And then you come in, and there's this huge, these are big chambers.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely fantastic stonework, and it's all amazing. And you think, how's that inside,
Yeah.
And that's part of what it's about. That it's that terrible word. There's a bit of a journey coming in and going out and stuff like that, and it all just works somehow.
You almost sort of see how people tied, and I mean, this place is obviously a lot more vaulted than a lot of barrows that are even more accessible in places like Wayland Smithy, things like that. But, sort of years and years ago, when so much like fairy folklore was attributed to them, like this idea of going, it's a portal to the other world. Sort of you going in and coming out into a different, you kind of get where it comes from in a way, in that.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's almost got the TARDIS effect. It's sort of bigger inside than you expect it to be, I think, from the hill.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Bizarrely so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do people perform any kind of rituals or ceremonies? Do you hold anything like that here?
Well, there's two sorts. One is that when people bring an urn in, it's entirely up to them what they do, how they say goodbye.
Yeah.
Some people, it's just a very simple, ritual. Some people, it's a bit more complicated. Some nothing at all. The other thing is we became a place of worship, and so we have some Druid friends who come in and mark the two solstices, 2 equinoxes here, and we have little ceremonies then, and that's quite nice. It gives them somewhere that's meaningful, and it adds another layer of meaning, even for people who aren't. And we're very, very, very careful to say, whilst it's a place of worship for them, anyone is welcome.
Yeah.
Any religion or none. We're very inclusive like that. But I think people feel that just adds another layer of meaning. And I've had people who are a bit not sure about this come along to them and go, do you know, that was actually rather touching. So almost.
I mentioned sort of like portal to the other world and that sort of the old beliefs. I mean, obviously there is a lot of lore attributed to barrows. I mean, first of all, how do you feel about, sort of what's your opinion on a lot of this lore that goes into, sort of the idea of barrows and sort of, and the idea of people maybe, if not now, but one day attaching it to this barrow?
That's rather interesting. I had not really thought about it. I mean, one thing that we did, we expect this place to last for, thousands of years, maybe. Hopefully, no reason it shouldn't do. That's what, when we're building it, it was like we want it to be a place forever. How it'll be seen in the future is intriguing. I mean, there's a whole lot from an archaeological point of view rather than law point of view. And there are various people who've done research. Is you can see how barrow is used by not a reproduction, not people who are doing an ancient technology type
Yeah.
barrow. This is a working barrow for people to really use, and getting how do people feel about that? How does that work? And then thinking, well, what would this look like if you look back? And I think it gives a real insight as to how, law sort of builds up from, like I say, ignorance of what any real purpose. That sounds wrong. You know what I mean?
No, I understand completely.
Yeah, we don't understand what this is about, so let's create a story about it.
Yeah.
And that's, you wonder, at the moment we think everyone knows everything about this, it's on the internet, it's all written down. But in 200 years' time, 100 years' time, 1,000 years' time, will any of that knowledge still be around?
Exactly. It only takes like some kind of social upheaval, or not even that sometimes. Sometimes things are just lost, aren't they?
Yeah. One of the classics is, sorry, just
Yeah, sorry.
the Wands Dyke on top of the hills here, from runs just above there. Huge construction within our written history. About 700, 800 AD. Not ancient history and such like that.
Yeah.
No one's got any idea, really, of who or why built it. It was built.
Yeah.
But at the time, it must have been the biggest thing for a generation of people. And it just, the knowledge of it disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting on that as well, because you've got, I remember the first time I went to West Kennet Longbarrow years and years ago, there was someone sort of holding court telling all these tourists, like, oh, well, this was a womb, and they saw this as a womb, and this is why they built it this way. And I'm there in the corner sort of thinking, none of that has got any evidence to it at all, but I don't want to interrupt the guy. But nowadays I would. But what I was going to say was, we were talking about West Kennet yesterday. You've got Romano-British coins being left on top of some of these barrows, which kind of, it's like they had attributed their own, almost, well, not fairy lore, we don't know what they thought, but they'd been using it as that kind of their own lore about it. So it's not a new phenomena to like neo-pagans or anything like that, I guess, is it?
Yeah.
So, historically we've always done that.
I think in that case they're probably making offerings to the dead in the way. Don't Romans are superstitious about ghosts and things, aren't they?
Yeah, but we don't know definitely that was for the dead, though. I guess, do we? That could have been for anything.
Yeah.
But I suppose I'm just trying to calculate. I presume yes, the Roman period is closer to us than the building of
Exactly.
West Kennet was to the lot.
It was already thousands of years old by then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So already like well sealed up, and they didn't. I mean, they might have had to dig around in there. We know for quite a while people think those hills might have some,
gold.
amber or gold in. So
I mean, one day maybe there'll be some folklore about yourself. I guess.
I'm sure there probably is.
Tim that built this barrow.
They'll change the name slightly. It'll be a slight variation on Tim, I think.
Yes,
and you'll be this mythical figure in the landscape in little folklore books sold in shops.
Personally, you've spent quite a lot of time here in the barrow in the daytime and the night time. We do like to talk about ghosts and things on this show. So have you ever experienced anything like that whilst you've been here?
I'm afraid not.
No.
One of the things I did, I was a bit afraid when we were first planning it, was that it would feel spooky.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be dark and claustrophobic and like that. And because we're underground here, but it just doesn't. The feeling I get is always sort of, it's uplifting rather than a depressing place.
I feel that.
Because you're coming in out of the weather as well, there's almost a feeling of safety. Like the wind dies down in here. It's very quiet, very peaceful.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very safe. It's very secure. This is one of the things that a lot of people said. You've got, this absolute calmness. And the acoustics are such that it sort of is this calm, quiet place, and that just feels right.
Yeah, so the thing we were trying to explore in West Kennet was whether archaeoacoustics, this idea of whether you're tuning into something that's there or not, or whether it's just something that affects our brain, is that something that you think they would have done deliberately, or is it just the nature of the shape of these buildings?
That's fascinating question, because we've actually done we've had various examples of here, and people are trying the acoustics out with some amazing effects.
Yeah.
And it's the passageway. As Steve Marshall explained, how the passageway being a certain length, you get certain resonances down at the sort of 8 hertz type level, which you can't hear, but your brain affects. So the acoustics are amazing, and different food. Now, I think that, I mean, there's no way you could design. We didn't design this to have certain acoustics. We're not a concert hall designer. I don't think. I think they might have discovered that something like this has amazing acoustics. So if we build it a second time, hey, it works again. There's something going on here.
Yeah.
And I think, and I do think it would have had some part on how they saw the barrows.
Yeah.
It is such a powerful effect. If you get the right tone, music, rhythm going, it is incredibly strong. And we've tried various music here, or beats, and it.
Is there a particular kind of music you found works the best, I guess?
Hip hop. Sorry.
No, see, less suitable than hip hop even. So drums and horns.
Yeah.
That sort of resonance. They seem to work very well. And just one of the classics is just talking about big horn sounds is like Wagner. That's sort of like that big,
Yeah, sort of big kind of,
Yeah,
Sort of,
and it resonates everywhere, and that is like, ooh, that's and obviously single drums. But the strangest one, I have mentioned this before, so is Steve Marshall suggested Donna Summer, "Love to Love You, Baby."
It's a choice.
I don't know if you can recall it at all.
Yeah, no, the one. Yeah.
Can go on for an hour, it seems.
we won't ask you to sing it.
No. But that's she starts with a very pure voice.
Yeah.
And, like that. And those sort of sounds actually also are very incredible. So what I'm sort of saying is that it's the sounds that seem to work are long, continuous. I was going to say not. I don't think I can't recall something with strings actually sounding right.
Yeah.
So it's sort of things that we sort of expect maybe that
That they would.
ancient musical technology would have done. Yeah.
Were you involved with the experiment? Like, did you try it yourself? Did you experience?
I've heard. Yeah, I've been in here and listening to various things, and various drums and stuff, and hear this, and yes, we've tried music in here at various times.
For those sort of coming back out of the realms of folklore for a little bit and archaeoacoustics, for those interested in the more practical purpose of it, how would someone go about looking into getting their ashes interred here, or those of a loved one?
So how we worked is all the niches were all reserved very quickly, and that's how we financed the place. And so we're pretty much, they've all been reserved for some time. Occasionally we get someone moving abroad or something like that returns. So it's always worth you asking.
Yeah.
If we've got one, but those sort of details are, as I famously say, it's all on the website where we sort of put the details of how we do it.
Any interest in a second barrow, like a string of ones, maybe a round barrow next or something?
When we first did this, it was so popular, it was very tempting to do something else, and then thought, no, it would not feel right. It just wouldn't have felt right here. But what has happened is other barrows have been built around the country since this one.
Started a new trend.
And there's even another one being built this year. So almost been continuous barrow building since then. And they've got, some of them are slightly, I guess, more commercial. They are more commercially feel to them, maybe. Not all of them. Some of them are much bigger inside.
Yeah.
And they all have their own individual feelings, and so they're great.
I mean, this very much does feel like a sort of like a sanctuary, like a place of peace, you know.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, you know, sort of got the intended effect, really, isn't it?
I think they all do. But I mean, I went up. The last new one I've seen was up in Scotland, which is an amazing. It's an oval-shaped barrow inside, and they've actually left the oculus open at the top.
Oh, really?
Because you don't need a stone at the top because it's a self-supporting
Yeah.
structure. So it's got the sun and the rain and the snow and the leaves coming in. But they've got enough room for, I don't know, 40, 50 people inside that barrow. And they're holding ceremonies and stuff in there as well. So it's amazing. So, yeah, it's a lovely thing to be involved in, looking around.
So if you don't mind, a little bit more personal, but I wanted to ask you about your own personal beliefs about kind of death and the afterlife and how that connects you to somewhere like this.
Yeah.
If you even have any.
I don't really have any.
No.
No. I am an atheist, and I sort of think once we're gone, we're gone. Which makes me a bit strange to do that. But you will have noticed on the door outside we have a non-symbolic symbol.
Yeah.
Which is actually DNA. That's what it's based on.
Yeah.
And that encapsulates a feeling that we are just a little carrier of something that goes on forever. You know, that we're just a vehicle for not only DNA, for our ideas and our thoughts and our families to pass through. And I think that's how I see eternity, or whatever, how we passed on, is a more ethereal thing rather than something that happens to an individual.
I mean, that's it as well, I guess. I mean, like, these people, you know, they're in here for as long as the barrow's here, right?
Yeah.
So, and definitely, you know, sort of a lot of the time you find in graveyards, things like that, not all the time, but sometimes, what, you know, sort of it's a nan, so the children of that person will visit, the grandchildren, but then afterwards it's kind of like peters off. And it might happen with some here, but also, you know, if you've got someone in the family that's in a place like this, you know, it kind of encourages you to want to go and see them a little bit more in some ways.
Absolutely, yes.
And as you say, it is a place for the living, really,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, my mum was buried in a graveyard, and I'll be honest, almost nobody visits anymore. Like, the first few years, everybody goes, particularly on the anniversary, and it gets to a point where it peters out. And no one really visits anymore. And I've always found that really sad as an idea. Like, I've said for a long time, like, I'd rather someone scatters my ashes up somewhere like West Kennet. And, I think years ago I wrote a little piece about it where I referred to it as being set free upon the wind rather than being trapped in a graveyard. Like, they are places for the dead. Like, nobody goes there except to visit someone that's dead, right? There's no connection to it. It just feels dead.
And that's one of the things about this barrow is, you know, you don't have to come in. You know, 'cause we obviously keep it locked for security.
Yeah.
But you can just come any time, particularly in the summer. You know, it's a glorious place. It's got wonderful views. It's a nice place. You know, why not come out and bring a picnic and you go? We're just going to the barrow. Yeah, might remember Mum whilst we're there, but it's not a depressing going to a graveyard sort of place. It's a place you can enjoy life. You know, and kids will run around and the dog will run around. So it's all good.
Yeah.
So we have to ask, and obviously you probably get asked this every time someone speaks to you about it. Are one of these reserved for you?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, is it sort of a place one, or is it just a discreet one tucked away? Or?
It's not a particularly. It's just one down the end, but it's nothing special about it.
Oh, fantastic! So, I mean, I'd be honest with you, I'd have been shocked if you hadn't. So
it's even the stonemason actually rang me up one day and said, I'm doing your stone today, Tim.
What a thing to hear, right?
Yes.
Have you heard something?
Really? Okay. So,
it's just a cold.
So yes. So I have got mine's actually. It's not on this chamber. It's another chamber. So yeah, I'm there with my name on a stone.
A little reminder. It's like, you know, sort of one of those, oh, what do they call them? The memento mori. Yeah, that's it. You know, the memento mori is like, you know, death comes for us all. Like, literally, that's my name there every time you pass. It's,
absolutely.
Did you want to? I don't know if you've got a website or social media.
There is a website. There's also a Facebook group, but it's just www.thelongbarrow.com.
Okay, and we'll link that in the episode as well.
Yeah, because that's got all the details on it. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Really
Well,
appreciate it.
Good.
So we are back home now, well, our respective homes, and that was all very lovely, Craig, from Silbury Hill and its little sisters to the weird acoustics at West Kennet, not to mention, no religious nonsense sort of, attitude, or I don't want to say nonsense, but you know what I mean, at All Cannings, where you can... Well,
very down to earth.
yeah,
That's
down to earth, we'll call it that, down, literally down under the earth, where you can more or less spend, pay money to spend 5,000 years with Tim.
Yeah, it's not a bad retirement plan, though, is it?
Yeah, it's all very cool, and very Wessex, isn't it? But none of it really addresses the why, does it, Craig? The why go to all the effort? Why build these massive mounds and hills in the first place? Why spend literally generations of people's lives hauling Sarsens through the mud? Aside from it being cool, of course. What was the point of it all?
I mean, that's the heart of it, isn't it? And the answer is why we're even doing this show. It's all about the why of the landscape. They weren't just building piles of dirt. They were leaving enduring evidence of their existence. It's how humans mark the earth to say we were here and we honour our dead.
Yeah, it's not just a cemetery, is it? It's a statement.
Yeah, exactly. But there is a deeper shift here. Back then, people lived with death. It was right there in the middle of the community. These days, we're kind of so separated from it. We've sanitized it and, pushed it behind closed doors. And I think that's why people go looking for things like, phone calls from the dead, or they get obsessed with experiencing ghosts or the other.
Yeah, it's a way of sort of trying to bridge that gap, really, isn't it? Trying to understand what actually happens when, the lights go out.
Yeah, precisely. But I loved what Tim said back in the Barrow as well, that he doesn't necessarily need to believe in a traditional afterlife to find peace in what he's built. He walks his dog through the field every day. He looks at the Barrow and he's just comforted by the fact that that's where he'll end up. No big celestial mystery. It's just a place in the soil of a place that he loves.
Yeah, it's a lovely view, that, and very sort of Neolithic, very prehistoric, isn't it? You're not going away to some sort of far-off heaven up there or anything. It's about staying right here, in the ridge and the chalk, sort of as part of the landscape you grew up, grew old, loved, lived and died in, the one that you knew.
Yeah, and we kind of use the weird to fill the void that used to be filled by that sense of belonging too. So these sites, the ancient ones and even Tim's modern one, they're all living history. And that's why we were so firm about the English heritage side of things earlier. These sites only work as living history if they're still standing. So it's our collective job to protect them so that people 5,000 years from now can stand where we were and ask the exact same questions we were.
Yeah, fair play. It's a big responsibility for, a couple of little weirdos like us, right?
It is, but someone's got to do it.
And that will be us. Yeah. So, do you want to do the plug?
Yeah. I mean, head to our website and social media for all updates. You can send us some money and support the show via Buy Me a Coffee and help fund these trips and help us keep the studio lights on.
Indeed, every little helps, and you'll get access to Discord, which is getting nicely active now. We have a good chat on there, a newsletter with a whole bunch of resources on, a few extra perks that we've announced to members already and will be coming up in the upcoming months. But thank you for joining us, and remember, until next time,
stay weird.